What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning. Ooh, rain up she rises, ooh, rain up she rises, ooh, rain up she rises, early in the morning.
Sometimes I'm so disgusted with humanity it makes me want to puke. Not personal, only natural. A human being forced to live among apes would feel the same. No gentility nor self-control can save you. And it's not the smell of other men that sickens, so much as the human stench now rising from my own body, mingling with the scent of my genesis. Here on my chest, smell me. Smell me! Bury your face deep into the fur. Deeper. Deeper.
Esteemed gentlemen, ladies, you have afforded me a great honor by inviting me to the Academy in order to give a report upon the life I formerly led as an ape. Regrettably, I may be unable to comply with this request, at least to the extent to which you may have been hoping. It is, after all, many moons since I have been an ape. A twinkle of an eye to the history of mankind. Certainly a life lived at a gallop. So many teachers and so much advice. The spur of applause, and even on occasion the rousing strains of an orchestra. So far, so good. And yet, in essence, a lonely life, with my supporters remaining steadfastly on the other side of the barriers. But I know I could never have achieved all that I have had I stubbornly clung to the roots, to the fading memories of youth. Indeed, it was the renunciation of self. That was the principal sacrifice I demanded those many moons ago, born as I was, a free ape. And yes, I have submitted to the yoke. And in return, perhaps by way of revenge, my memory has begun to close the doors upon me. At first, humanity permitting, I might have returned to the past, somewhere under this vast archway that the heavens form above us. But as I have been driven ever onwards on my fixed course, well, that way of return has diminished in my wake, and it has rather been here in the world of men that I have made my recovery, and indeed continue to seek comfort. That persistent tempest of my past, once my relentless pursuer has begun to abate. Indeed, today it is but a gentle zephyr that plays about my heels. And as for the opening through which it blows, that opening through which I myself was once blown, well, even were I willing and able to summon up the strength to return, I should need to scrape the very fur from my body in order to force my way back through. But to dispense with the metaphor and speak plainly, For once, your life as 8, ladies and gentlemen, insomuch as some such we are led to believe lies behind you, cannot be further removed from you than is mine from me today. But do not all God's creatures feel a little tickling at the heels? The little ape before you and the great Achilles alike? And perhaps I do have something left of a tale. Fear not, I shall endeavor to reveal it with appropriate decorum. So, here we are. Good afternoon, and how do you do? How do you do? How do you do? The first thing I learned was the handshake. How do you do, sir? Madam. As we all know, the handshake denotes candor. Well, as I stand here today before you at the apex of my career, apex, I hope to add some candid words to the candor of this first handshake. And while I have no doubt that my report will add little to the great wealth of human knowledge, let it at least be a way of describing the course that this erstwhile ape has taken in order to gain admittance into the world of men. It shall, of course, be limited to the facts to whose veracity I can reasonably attest, and rest assured I would not include even those had not my position on the great variety stages of the free world become so unassailably established. For that I thank you. Where to begin? Well, I was born of the Gold Coast, of that much I'm certain. For the circumstances of my capture, I am wholly reliant on the testimony of strangers. A hunting expedition dispatched by the Hagenbeck Zoo. And I have since shared many a fine bottle of claret with the leader of that expedition, I can tell you. They had concealed themselves. They were lying in wait in the riverside underground when I and my troop of apes came down for our evening drink. Shots were fired. I alone was hit twice. Once in the face. Such a graze, I know, but it has left this livid red scar, as you can see, the scar that has branded me with the sobriquet Red Peter. Hideous name. The bloody monkey dreamt up that one, huh? It's really the only difference they can see between myself and that circus tube Peter, the red mark on my face. You know Peter? Well, enjoyed a little local celebrity some years ago. No longer with us. Died only recently. Huh? Forgotten? Oh, well, there it is. The second shot caught me here. Well, just below the hip. Serious wound, this one. The reason some of you may have noticed that I limp a little to this day. I recently read an article by one of the flurry of windbags who see fit to vent their opinions of me in the gutter presses, claiming that my his apish misdemeanor is not yet fully in check. The proof being that when receiving visitors, he has a tendency for taking down his trousers in order to display his bullet hole. You think this hack should have his tippy-tappy typing fingers blown off one by one? lower my trousers whenever I praise. There's nothing to see here but a well-groomed pelt and a scarf and a friend. Let us not beat about the bush. A bloodthirsty pot shot! It's as plain as the nose on your face. And no quest for the truth was ever chartered by social nicety, and I dare say that if this windbag were to drop his drowse for a visitor, the aspect would be quite different. Well, put it for him that he had the good manners so he was a button down. Spare me your fatal money, please! After the abduction, I came to my senses. This is where my account of events can truly begin to take over. In a cage, below decks of the Adaptation. Not the regular four-sided barred cage, you understand. Merely three sides to this one, attached to a wooden crate, which served as the fourth wall. The whole contraption is too low, in which to stand upright, too narrow, in which to sit down, and therefore obliged to squat, knees bent. Do you know why? I'm simple first, I wish to see no one. Simply live out the rest of my life in darkness, presumably. This is exactly what I do. I simply squat here, on trembling knees, staring back into the empty crate with the ballast, cut into the flesh of my back. This form of incarceration is considered beneficial for violent beasts during the early stages of captivity, and I have to concede that when one takes the human point of view, that is certainly the case. Unfortunately for me, I was not privy to the human point of view in those days. And for the first time in my life, all I can see is no way out! In front of me, there's nothing. It's just an empty crate. Solid wall of boards. This narrowest of cracks running between them. And then my artless optimism migrated with a shriek of delight. Beyond the boards, the forest begins. It's too small. Couldn't poke a tail through there. Far beyond the strength of a little ape to force it wider. They say that during the early stages, I remained uncommonly silent. They doubted I would lost the voyage, but in the unlikely event that I survived this critical initiation, I might prove remarkably conducive to training. Well, survive I did. Hopelessly sobbing. Painfully picking at fleas or sucking on a coconut, banging my head against the cage, sticking my tongue out to whoever dared to come near. Yes, these were the ways. So I'm told that I spent the early days of my new life trapped in the belief that there was no way out. If that, of course, I express myself in human terms, which often fall short in describing the opinions of an ape, but I have to say that even though I've lost my primitive perspective, sometimes a trace of it will remain lingering in my words. As a young ape, I had so many ways out of everything. Now there was none. I was pinned down. I was transfixed. God above, had I been nailed up to the boards themselves, my mobility could not have been more attenuated. Why is it happened to me? to skin in between my toes, red raw, until the blood begins to flow, and I wouldn't come up with an answer. I get pressing my back into the bath until I'm all but cutting through. I'm still being on the vice. Suffice it to say, I had no way out. So I had to invent one. Without it, I was done for. Up against the wall, nailed up in a box, staring dead in the face. Well, as far as Herr Hagenbeck and his cronies are concerned, nailed up in a box is precisely where an ape like me belongs. So in that case, in that case, I better stop being an ape. Brilliant! For the brainwave. Or rather, should I say, the visceral response, for as we all know, an ape can only think with his belly. Now, before I continue, I should perhaps explain my meaning of the phrase "a way out." I use the expression in a statistic sense, and then deliberately avoiding the word freedom. Now, I do not speak of this exalted state of being with acres of empty space on all sides. As an ape, I've known that, and but I'm quite sure that I've met many men who craved. But speaking for myself, I did not seek freedom then, and what do I now? I might also express the opinion that having now lived among men for so many years, all too often they are seduced, hoodwinked by some notion of freedom or other. And as freedom may be reckoned among the most sublime of notions, the disillusion at its absence may be similarly sublime. Now, in the wings of theatres, as I wait my turn to perform, my eye is often drawn to a brace of acrobats high up in the rafters on their, how do you call this thing then? Trapeze. Clambering to hang. They rock to and fro. They float into the air and in each other's arms. One even hanging by her hair from the teeth of another. Human freedom. This carefully contrived charade of self-satisfying distraction. Should an audience of apes witness such a performance, the walls of the theatre would collapse in the gales of their laughter. No, not for me. No freedom for me, just the way out. Right, left. Makes no odds. They make no other demand. And if the way out shall prove an illusion, well, my demand is a modest one. My disillusion that a refusal could surely be no great. But to get out! To move forwards! Not to cower in the corner, crushed, arms raised in defeat. These days I can see clearly that without a profound inner calm, I could never have found my way out. I believe I owe all that I have become to this sense of tranquility that descended upon me after my first few days in the final big steamer. And for that tranquility, I believe I have its crew to thank. they were good creatures. In spite of it all. And I can still recall the clang of their heavy footfalls echoing through the ruins of my dreams. Everything was done so very slowly. See, even a rub of the eye is like the hand has been weighted down. You terrible jokes. Oh, no offense, mate. Not taking, mate. Rough barks of laughter raining to this feeble cough. They always had somewhere to spit. Don't care where they spit. Oh, bloody hell. Who is grumbling about the fleas that they're catching from me? But they never agree with me. No, my Furbies flees the fleece charm. Simple fact. You're a bloody monkey's fault, isn't it? On breaks from their duties, they will often sit in a semicircle around the front of the cage. Barely speaking, just the odd bark. Stretched out on the crates. Smoking the pipes. I've better to move, and they heartily slap their thighs. Oh, bloody monkey! Aye. And every once in a while, one of them might take a stick. Aye. Let's look. Look it through the bars of the cage. Of course, if somebody was to offer me a cruise on that day, I should naturally decline. Nevertheless, my memories of life below decks of the Hagenbeck steamer, far from all hateful. And yes, it was this tranquility that descended upon me whilst in this company of men that kept me from trying to escape. Must have known. If I didn't find a way out, I would die. But you can never escape just by running away. Cannot say now whether escape was even a possibility, but I believe it was. And for an ape, escape must always be a possibility. Oh. With what they've left me on his teeth in my knowledge, I have to be careful, even when cracking a nut. But in those days, they were strong. Strong enough, I believe, to have gnawed my way through the lobe of the cage. But I did not. Well, good would it have done? The moment I'd stuck out my head, I'd have been recaptured and cast into no doubt worse confinement. Had I managed to slip through the bars, sought refuge among the other animals there, and perhaps was giant pythons opposite, how would I have fared? Breathe my last in their mortal coils. Even suppose I'd managed to sneak as far as the main deck, vault the handrail into the ocean below. What then? Bob a while on the dark waves before plunging to the depths. Desperate measures, huh? Peculiar circumstances. Well, though they predate my facility to reckon as a human, I reach the same conclusion as those of us who can. Incapable of reason, I calmly observe. I watch the men going to and fro. Always the same faces. Always the same movements. Seems to me to be always the same man. Well, you all look so alike to me. But nobody is stopping him. He goes about his business quite unmolested. And the dawn begins to break before my eyes. Nobody ever promises that should I magically become human, the bars of my cage would disappear. Of course not. Impossible. Ah. But when the impossible happens, such a promise may be said to have been kept, however vain the hope of it ever even being made may have seemed. But the men themselves, they hold no attraction to me. Indeed, had they been fixated on the freedom I have described, I think the leap into the ocean would have been preferable to any way out suggested by the diluvic forces of the man. In any case, it takes a great deal of contemplation before any plan of action is hatched, and it's only after many weeks of deliberate observation that I'm eventually launched in the right direction. It's just so easy. It's easy to be a good human being. I learned to spit in the first few days. Used to spit in each other's faces. Only difference being that I always lick my face clean. Men never do. Not anymore! I too am smoking a pipe like an old sea dog. And if I press my opposable thumb into the bowl of the pipe, tamping, you call it, a roar of approval will go up in the hole. Why? But it takes a lifetime to truly understand the difference between a full pipe and an empty one. The booze was my biggest challenge. Oh, the smell of it was torture. And I forced myself to it with all my might, but it was many weeks before I overcome my revulsion. Oh. Strangely, the men take this inner struggle of mine more seriously than anything else about me. Yes, as I say, I cannot distinguish one man from another, but I know one fellow comes again and again, alone with his mates, any time of day or night. Here he'll be, and he'll set himself up in front of the bars of my cage and attempt to instruct me in the arts of the drinker. I know I fascinate him. He wants to fathom the mystery of my being. Slowly he uncorks a bottle of rum. Very slowly. Checking to see that I'm paying attention. He needn't worry. My wild eyes are locked. No teacher on God's earth had ever a pupil so rapt as I. He raises the open bottle to his mouth. My eyes follow all the way down his gaping throat. He nods in approval, placing bottle to lips. I clutch myself in anticipation. He necks a hefty slug, and I foul the cage in my chaos, but quite undaunted. He hoists the bottle in finale, and in a single audacious draught, he quaffs the entire contents, bending extravagantly backwards as he does so to force his point home. Well, desperate I am to follow, that can do no more than hang limply through the bars of the cage as this masterclass concludes with a rub of his belly in a satisfied grin. Well, I'm quite overawed by this demonstration, but now must my efforts begin. I accept the proffered bottle in trembling hands. Somehow, I managed to uncork it. Inspired by my small success, I raise it just as shown. I place it to my lips and dash the bottle down in disgust, utter disgust. For although empty, the taint of the spirit remains. My master is appalled. Myself am mortified. It's no solace to be gained from an exemplary burial album in a vacant grave. All too often, our lessons ended thus. To my master's credit, he never loses his temper. It's true, he might take his burning pipe and hold it to some hard-to-reach part of my body until the fur begins to smolder. But just before it catches, he pats out the glimmers with his own enormous good hand. No, he's not angry with me. He understands. We are brothers in arms. Both at war with our apish natures. And he knows mine is the harder battle. Ah, what a triumph it was in. That one evening. Oh, there's really quite a crowd. Gramophone is playing. There's an officer mingling with a man. Carry on, chaps. As I, take hold of a full bottle of rum carelessly left in reach of the cage. I uncork it with aplomb. The revels turn us one, and with not a grimace, not a moment's hesitation, but with eyes rolling like a heart drinking, I raise the bottle, I press it to my lips, and I flush that water down my bobbing throat. Yes, I drain the bottle dry, and I dash it to the ground. Not in despair, no, not this time, but with a performance triumphant flourish. Quite forgetting the grin or the belly rub, but with senses roaring, quite in spite of myself, I let out a shrill and unmistakable, "How did you?" Yes. How did you? I break into human speech, I crash into the world of men, and I feel its echoing response. Listen, it's choking, enveloping my febrile sweat-soaked body like a sweet caress. I should remind you, slavish imitation of human beings doesn't carry any weight with me. I hate the men for one reason and one reason only, to find a way out! My triumph was short-lived. I lost my human voice like a shot, dumbstruck for months. My aversion to the battle returned with a vengeance. But the course I was to follow had been set once and for all. Land ahoy! He docked at Hamburg, and I'm put in the care of my first official trainer. It soon becomes clear to me that two ways lie ahead, either the zoo or the variety stage. It's no contest. I should take to the stage. What will the zoo mean but another cage? You wind up in the old sun, your race is when truly run. So I learn, ladies and gentlemen. I learn. Needs must, eh? You must learn to find your way out, and you must learn at all costs. Stand over yourself, whip in hand, play your own hide and failure to comply. My ape nature flees from me, head over heels and away. My teacher, nigh on turned savage himself with the shock of it all. Carted off to the nut house. Oh, save your tears. He came to his senses soon enough. But it's true, I've seen enough many teachers, but my confidence grows. The public pricks its ears as my talents start to shine. Things are looking bright for Red Peter the Ape Man. I went to suite of rooms with a teacher in each. I spring from room to room, 5 disciplines at once. How rapidly I progress, how the rays of knowledge illuminate my waking brain from every side. Intoxication! Now, be clear. No illusion. Nothing, none. But with an ability quite unmatched by anything before me, I have attained the cultural level of the average European. No great boast. Do you see a monkey in a cage? Ha! There's this quaint old adage. To translate from the German, when you need to go, find yourself a bush. But that's all I've done. I found my bush. You gave me no choice. Freedom. Freedom was never an option. As I survey my accomplishments, I find no cause for complaint, neither for complacency. Hands and blouse bits, bottle of claret on the table. I recline in my favorite chair, and I gaze out of my window. Should a visitor call, I receive him appropriately. My eagle-eyed melodrama, poised in the vestibule, hanging on my every word. My diary is full. My performances are sellouts. My success of the highest order. And when I return at night from sumptuous banquets, from conferences with scientific societies, from exclusive gatherings in the grandest of houses, an obliging little she-ape is awaiting for me, and I take my pleasure with her in the way that we apes do. But we never meet by daylight. No, she has this bewildered, insane look in her eyes. It's like a broken animal. Nobody sees it but me. I cannot bear it. Well, all settled down, I think. I think that is everything. Hope I'm not still banging my head on an empty crate. I don't seek approval. No, I don't seek the judgment of any man. I just want to understand. One makes his mark. Others may make it fit for them. Gentlemen, ladies. How do you do?
What shall we do with a drunken sailor? Shave his belly with a rusty razor. Put him in a bed with a captain's daughter early in the morning. Hooray, and up she rises. Hooray, and up she rises. Hooray, and up she rises.